Hello, guys. This is Samuel Akumbom Tombwen, student of the College of Science, Engineering, and Technology in the Grand Canyon University. And the title of this course is CYB 610 or 500 Penetration Testing and Risk Management. The instructor is Dr. Howard Goodman, and the date of today is August 28, 2024. So let's jump right into it. So in this paper today, we're trying to do penetration testing using several scans, and then implementing some mitigating techniques to see how we can, you know, secure our systems. So let's start by part A, which is explanation, summary, and description. So I will start by planning, organizing, and performing a penetration testing on my Metasploitable 2 virtual machine. So installing and configuring both the Metasploitable 2 and Kali Linux VMs would be the first step in planning to carry out a penetration test on the Metasploitable 2 VM. I need Kali Linux VM because that will be used as my attacking machine. Once these are installed, I configured uh, I configured the required network settings and other resources. I will put together a list of tools to use for the testing. These tools will be, like I mentioned before, Nmap scan, Nikto scan, OWASP Zap scan, and NetSUSE. Once I have this complete list, the next step will be to the next step will be enumeration. This is where I will get information about my target machine, the Metasploitable 2. So you have the attacking machine, which is the Kali Linux VM, and the target machine, which is the Metasploitable 2 VM. Please don't be mistaken. So information such as this is the process of enumeration. So information such as IP address, services running, open port, operating system version, and much more are being collected in this stage. So such information will be gathered using some of the tools I listed above, mostly the Nmap tool, the Nmap scan tool. So once I'm done gathering this information, I will continue the penetration testing, documenting findings, developing flaw hypotheses, pushing forward to gain access, and coming out with mitigation techniques to secure the system. So the importance of a penetration test. Penetration testing or ethical hacking refers to the security process of evaluating a system or network for vulnerabilities and susceptibility to threat and uh, 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 threat hackers and cyber attacks. Sorry. So it is important for organizations to perform penetration tests regularly, at least once a year, to ensure their information technology, the IT infrastructure remains strong and well protected. So let's move on to the next slide. It gets a little bit more interesting as we go down because it gets more technical. So using pen tests to identify weak points in the system defense can help companies often or obtain information about different ways hackers can gain unauthorized access to sensitive and or personal information or engage in some other type of malicious activity that can result in data breach. Generally, penetration testing helps organizations too. So these are the general things that this exercise helps organizations with. Prepare for an attack by teaching personnel how to handle any type of break-in from a malicious entity. Identify risk by offering insight into which channels in the organization or system are most at risk. Sorry. Assist developers in making fewer errors when static scans and dynamic scans are carried out. So let's look at how I will handle failures, which is very important anyway. So I will try to follow the planning I just mentioned above, as best as I can in order to avoid failures in following procedures. That being said, failure can always come up for different reasons. If I fail to follow procedure, the first place to bounce off would be my documentation of the process. So as you document, you make a mistake, you can always bounce back and go to where the last correct documentation takes you. So I will go back to where I failed and start over from there. At times, it can be a team operation, and failure can come from anyone. Yeah, it at times you have to do penetration testing with other team members, and failure can come from anyone, not just necessarily you. But when failure comes from someone, you don't have to make them feel bad or embarrassed. Like I put in my note here, a failure should not be looked upon as lack of knowledge in the process, and team members should be encouraged rather than scolded at or embarrassed. Okay, let's go now to the fun part. Okay, so this is the first scan. Like we've done in the other classes, I started with the Nmap scan for my enumeration. So after turning on my Kali VM and Metasploitable 2 VM, I ran an ifconfig, which is to get the IP address of my Kali VM, and that's attacking the VM, of course. And it is 192.168.1.17. So I perform an Nmap scan on the last octet. So I do an Nmap space 192.168.1.0/24 on the last octet of the IP address. And then I did not get the desired result, so I set my Metasploitable 2 network to breach and rebooted the VM. By elimination, I got my Metasploitable 2 VM IP as 192.168.1.8. The scan showed 23 open ports, but I want you to take note of something here. Take note of the third open port in this screenshot. It is port 23 TCP. It is open and it's telnet. Take note of that port because it will come towards the end of this presentation and it will be very important. Okay, let's go to the next slide. The next slide, sorry. So I ran another Nmap scan using the Nmap switch P, switch A, which is switch P is for port, and then switch A to give me more information about the version of the operating system that is running on my target machine, of course, my Metasploitable machine. So I got all this information. You have the Apache version. You have different kind of information that is very important that you can use to exploit this system. But let's just carry on and go to the next scan. So the next scan I used was the Nikto scan. So in my previous classes, I had already installed the Nikto tool. So I just used the command Nikto switch edge and the IP address of my target machine. And of course, I had more information. So you see, I have different vulnerabilities here. I have the anti-click jacking X-frame options header is not present, which is a vulnerability. I have the X content type options header is not present. So you have several important information that you could use here to, attack this system. But let's move on. So the next scan was the OWASP ZAP scan. Of course, I had already set that up in my previous classes. So I just used the IP address of my target machine and attacked my target machine from my Kali machine using the OWASP ZAP scan. And you can see from the screenshot the result that I get. In the next slide, I'll show you more results. So you can see I have root right there in the scan. You see, if I click on alert, you see hash disclosure, path traversal. So it's different kind of vulnerabilities that the OWASP ZAP scan could find. And let's move to the next scan we have here. This is the Nessus scan. So the Nessus scan, again, I had done that in the previous classes and we all saw that. So I just clicked on new scan and named it my last name underscore Metasploitable underscore 2, and I use again the IP address of the Metasploitable machine, which is my target machine, to perform the scan. And this scan took me about an hour to complete. And at the completion, I had 3 critical vulnerabilities, four high vulnerabilities, 5 medium, 2 low, and 53 info in my results. You can see here. But if you click detailedly, you'll see more information about all of them. So you see that in the next slide. You see critical here, mix, high, mix, medium. So this is just the vulnerabilities that are present. Let's look into this some more. This is some of the vulnerabilities that I found using the Nessus scan. So CGI, computer generated imagery, a generic SSI, which is server side, includes injection. So the remote web server hosts one or more CGI scripts that fail to adequately sanitize request strings and seem to be vulnerable to an SSI injection. That's a server side include injection attack. By leveraging this issue, an attacker may be able to execute arbitrary commands on the remote host. This vulnerability is rated as high. To mitigate this, disable SSI if you do not use them. Browsable web directories. This is another vulnerability. Multiple Nessus plugins found directories on the web server that are browsable. This vulnerability falls under the CGI family and is rated as medium. The mitigation technique is to use here is to make sure that the browsable directories do not leak confidential information or give access to sensitive resources. Additionally, use access restrictions or disable directory indexing for anyone that does. And of course, give me a moment, please. And of course, we have the HTTP trace track methods allowed. So this is another vulnerability. The remote web server supports a trace and or track methods. Trace and track are HTTP methods that are used to debug web server connections. The vulnerability is listed as medium. To mitigate this, disable these HTTP methods. So disable the trace and or track methods. That's the mitigation technique. And let's just move on to the next slide and look at more uh, vulnerabilities. So web application disclosure. This vulnerability is classified as medium, and its description is that at least one web application hosted on the remote web server discloses the physical path to its directories when a malformed request is sent to it. So leaking this kind of information may help an attacker fine-tune attacks against the application and its backend. It also falls under the CGI family. Filter error messages contain path information to mitigate this vulnerability. The next is the PHP exposed PHP information disclosure. The description of this vulnerability is that the PHP installed on the remote server is configured in a way that allows disclosure of potentially sensitive information to an attacker through a special uh, universal resource locator. Such a URL triggers an Easter egg built into PHP itself. This is classified as medium. The mitigation technique is in the PHP configuration file, php.ini, set the value of expose underscore PHP to off to disable this behavior. Restart the web server daemon to put this change to effect. Okay, let's look at some more. We have the web server web server transmits clear text credentials. Oh, this is a scary one. Even though it's listed as low, but it's scary. So the remote web server contains several HTML from fields containing an input of type password, which transmit their information to a remote web server in clear text, transmitting an input typed password in clear text. That is dangerous. An attacker is dropping the traffic between web server and browser may obtain login and passwords of valid users. Interestingly, this is classified as low. Make sure that every sensitive form transmit content over HTTPS. That's a secure version of HTTP to mitigate this vulnerability. Web server allows password auto-completion. Oh, this is scary too. Again, this is classified as low. The remote web server contains at least one HTML form field that has an input of type password where autocomplete is not set to off. This does not represent a risk to this web server per se, but it does mean that users who use the affected forms may have their credentials, saved in their browsers, which could in turn lead to a loss of confidentiality if any of them use a shared host or if their machine is compromised at some point. To mitigate this, add the attribute autocomplete equal to off to this field to prevent browsers from caching credentials. Sorry. Another vulnerability is the Apache HTTP server version. This is an information anyway. The remote host is running the Apache HTTP server, an open source web server. It was possible to read the version number from the banner. this could become a vulnerability as such information could be exploited using Nmap and Metasploit as we did for Keyoptrix 1 machine. And then we have the PHP unsupported version detection. We have the Apache Tomcat AJP connector request injection. And of course, I want us to look at this one. We have the port 23 and 25, Telnet and SMTP. So port 23, the Telnet, is highly vulnerable because it transmits data in clear text and has little to no authentication. It allows users to connect to devices remotely. SMTP is used for email communications and it does not detect spam nor spoofing. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Here it becomes a little bit more interesting. Okay, so I was able to log into my Metasploitable 2 VM, as you can see here, using MSF admin as the username and MSF admin as the password. And while I was in my Metasploitable, I tried to perform, some mitigation techniques. And the first one I did was to look at the port 23 and 25. So, like I said earlier, these ports being open are very a serious vulnerability. So I had to shut down this port, and the way to do that is to shutting to commenting out the telnet line and restarting the machine. And you will see that in the subsequent slide, and we compare from the first slide I showed earlier that the telnet is not still open. So another way was to upgrade to PHP my admin version 4.8.6 or later to mitigate SQLI vulnerability. I didn't succeed in this because my Metasploitable decided not to reach out to the internet. I tried all I could, and I really ran out of time. PHP unsupported version was another mitigation technique I wanted to use, but was unsuccessful. But if you use these mitigation techniques, you will harden your system to a certain degree. So the reason I made the choices for these mitigation techniques was for three reasons: severity, experience, and cost. First of all, severity. Most of the vulnerabilities were declared critical. For experience, to comment out the telnet for port 23 was easy to do. Updating PHP version should be easy to do once you connect to the internet. And then the last was because of cost. None of them cost anything. I just have to just cost me my time. That was it. And now let's look at this. The expected results. So for the port 23, I got the expected results. Okay, now look at this screenshot right here. You will see that port 23 is no longer present, and that is because I shut it down. I commented out the telnet port 23, and now users will have difficulties remoting into this system since telnet is used for hackers will have difficulties remoting into the system since telnet is used to remote, into systems. Let's move to the next slide. I did a scan of my Nexus and had the same result as I had before. Of course, because my PHP upgrades were not successful, I'll keep on trying, just run out of time. So the lesson I learned here in this exercise was to allocate more time for my penetration testing. And of course, I have these references. Thank you all for watching.